I paint directly onto the wall, using the most direct and simple means possible. My decision to paint directly onto the wall and to stop making work on canvas or movable works was a sort of solution to a problem of the particular time. You know, it was to do with the feeling that painting, and particularly the sort of traditions of painting I had been brought up with or was aware of or was sort of surrounded by, simply didn't belong in the world that I was living in, and I was looking for a way, really, to make painting part of other things. And it seemed like an obvious solution, you know. I had this means to my at hand, as it were, and I wanted to find a way of using it that fitted in with other things, that became part of other things. And I think that's still probably my main motivation for working in this way. I think some of the questions about painting and the problems that I had with the ease with which conventional paintings sort of become part of the market, some of those questions are concern me less now. I think throughout my work, all of my work, I'm much more interested in sort of fundamental intelligences of the thing, if you like, and how this dumb material gets tied up with meaning. First of all, you know, I never intended to become the artist who does this. You know, it wasn't, as I said in the beginning, it was a solution to a problem. I thought it would be one exhibition. And each time I made a wall painting, I thought it would be the last one. And then I became involved in it, and it became something that preoccupied me, a problem, if you like. But more latterly, I've wanted to challenge that situation for myself. In the first instance, I've wanted to sort of place something in that situation that's a problem, you know. And so, having sort of established a position, I'm trying to sort of like, you know, put some obstacles in the way of that sort of trajectory, if you like. I tend to look for something that's not there, and then find a place for that thing. And, you know, the thing about it not being there is that it in some way usually is there. I'm usually working with some information that is already in the space, but also I'm trying to sort of find something in that that's not part of that, I suppose. I like piano music. I like pianos because they have this sort of very, well, you imagine they have a sort of simple dimension, you know, that they're sort of a limit, unlike the violin, which has a voice like a person. The piano just has these keys that you press and they make noises. I'm very interested in how you can interact, or the body can interact with a machine like that and make, which apparently is mechanical, and make something which is beyond that. And I think that I try to approach painting in some ways by trying to simplify the means and make those means visible in the way, if you like, the notes on piano are visible. But I like to then do that thing, hopefully, with them, that goes beyond that, so that they can have a voice, if you like a violin. Strange as it may seem, I often look for some sort of problem in the space, if you like, or some sort of difficulty, and often it's like a point at which something is awkward or doesn't quite work, or is sort of, my attention is sort of attracted towards something that sort of shouldn't be visible in a way. I think those are the things that often start a work off. And one of the things that's so particular about the space is the sort of slashing, cutting shadows that you get. I mean, it's strangely lit for a gallery in a way. You know, the conventional, old-fashioned style of sort of top lighting and breaking that light, you know, diffusing that light so that it's even. That convention is kind of sort of broken here, and light plays a major part in the space. These cutting shadows and sharp light really plays a part in the whole building, and I think that is a beginning point for the work. And I think there are other interesting things going on. There are already paintings begun here that, in a way, suggested ideas. Pattern on the ceiling, which gives a grey tone to what is actually a white, operates in a very similar way to the painting which I've made. Whereby using pure black, I've created a tone between black and white by an optical device, if you like, by interfering with vision to create this sort of perceptual space, which is actually between you and the work. It's not actually the work. When you stand right up to the work, it becomes this solid thing again. But when seen from a certain point of view, it absorbs into the air of the building. And I think that thing probably affects me most. I think that I was very, Sura said this thing, that painting is the art of hollowing out the canvas. I mean, I always think that actually painting is the art of the infinite surface. And a lot of the work that I was doing had to do with this activity of the surface for quite a long time. More recently, in the last few years, I've started to think about these intellectual models of seeing, in particular these sort of perspective models, and usually it's in a slightly fucked up way. It's usually in a sort of like, I'm not trying to reinvent these things, but I do tend to there's a lot of sort of deconstructing that position, if you like, in the work. Deconstructing, that sounds kind of a little bit clever. I mean, thinking through it, trying to expose that thinking visually. And yes, I think in this work, in particular, in the big work in the main room, the work has two views. In some sense, it's a plan, and it's also this perspective. In some sense, it's a plan, an imaginary plan of distance, but it's also drawn in perspective. Yes, I think that your sort of proximity to the grain, and as it were, the grain of the surface, the asperity, the closeness, the touch, everything, that is something that, that I know probably better as well as the guys who built this place, really, in this particular environment. In the beginning, when I was a real painter, colour was something that was, extremely important to me, and I sort of set about spending some years learning a lot about it, as much as I could learn about it, in a theoretical and practical way. More recently, and I'm talking about the beginnings of this type of work, really, I wanted the paint, as to sort of quote Carl Andre's comments about Frank Stella, I wanted the paint to look as good as it did in the can. I wanted that purity, that cleanness. And also I've always strived for clarity, and so I tried to limit or simplify the range of possibilities, just in the way I've been talking about with, the piano. In a sense, its limits are what fascinates me. And although, I am definitely now starting to open that question up, still in reality there are only a few colours, and the secret is to make it look like there's more. The interesting thing about perspective for me, if taking the sort of like, sort of more conventional models of perspective that came into prominence or came into fashion really in the Renaissance. The interesting thing about this is the way that you can reconstruct the position of the viewer in plan. And when you look at a painting by Masaccio, you know where you're standing. You can reconstruct that from this model on this level. You can actually reconstruct the plan. And I'm quite interested in that relationship between what is an imaginary position and sort of an actual position, if you like. Both of them, in fact, are imaginary positions, but certainly in the case of this work, I mean, having had the idea to represent this space, if you like, I then had to reconstruct that or construct it in this imaginary position, if you like, in plan, and then push it to an elevation. And that's quite an interesting thing to me. Well, I've always been interested in drawing. I draw every day. I think the need, well, if it is a need, the need to do that has become, sort of more and more concentrated. And to see a practicality, actually, of using some movable materials has become an effective, solution, So, yeah, I mean, the fugitive, temporary nature of those materials is still very important to me. And the flimsiness, I like the fact that they can roll up, fold up, be torn up. I very much like that. I like how these posters, which, are this sort of, almost non-existent matter, suddenly become matter. And it's very much like the painting on the walls. They suddenly become solid when they are on the walls. One of my favourite artists has always been Philip Guston. I admire hugely, this questioning of the relationship between figuration and abstraction, and it's something that I'm very absorbed in. I consider all art to be abstract, all painting to be abstract, and my thinking about it follows that. But nevertheless, I'm very interested in figurative art. Part of the reason for having the system of working that I have is that I would be happy to continue endlessly working on these things. And I think that I often create a situation that closes out the possibility. In other words, I become involved in a sort of very close to concentrated activity that is kind of relentless. It's an endless task, and doesn't allow me to stand away from the picture, if you like. So it doesn't allow me to see the thing as a picture. In a sense, my view of it is much more as an object. And so it's always, I'm always in a very awkward space about the idea of pictures, actually. I mean, I think in these works I've pushed that idea a little bit further. I've suggested the idea of the picture more than I would normally. That's a phase that I think my work is going through, and that's kind of a challenge in a way for me, because it's something that I've consciously excluded from the work for a long time. And opening up that sort of idea is part of this question. It's part of this sort of, getting back involved with the work and imagining it as a space.